Okay, everyone, welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment. Um, so it's good to see everyone back. Um, Please take a few moments if you're new to just say hello in the chat box. I know there were questions last Monday that I didn't get to. If you had a question that I didn't get to, and if you're here, if you want to go ahead and put those in the question box at the bottom of your screen, and I want to make sure I get to those. Either before the practice or after the practice. And of course, my goal is to keep it under 2 hours tonight. Um, so welcome again. Welcome to those of you who are new. This is our Medicine Buddha practice on Monday night. Our Monday night Medicine Buddha practice. It's Monday night here on this coast in America, but it may be morning if you're in Australia. I think it is morning in Australia. So I know we have Australians joining us. Um, and but anyway, what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something that totally slipped my mind. But yeah, I'm just getting back from spending time with family, which was good. Um, and just preparing for the new year. Lots of stuff coming up. Lots of new things. I'm excited. Um, we're um, losing a lot of people right now. I've lost two friends in the past 2 weeks. I lost a friend, an old high school friend, this morning. We just found that out. I have a good friend of mine in Boston who just passed last week from COVID, and I'm going to offer their names in practice today as well. Also, you can start posting prayer requests as well. If you're new, it's optional. I didn't get to read them last Monday, but I'm going to try to do it today. Just anything you're praying for, anyone you're praying for, you know. What else? I'm going to talk more about kind of the passing of so many people right now. Well, not I'm not I'm gonna mention it tonight, but I'm gonna do like maybe just a short video, just maybe 5 to 6 minutes on social media, and we'll send it out over my email list as well. So if you're not signed up to the email list, please do so. That's lamarod.com. You can go right and sign up there. But yeah, this video, I just want to talk about, I know people are nervous and anxious. And I think that one of the things that's really important for us to understand is that at some point we have to like step in and start doing our work for the collective. Like, Bell Hooks and Desmond Tutu, Joan Didion, it's a lot of people, Stephen Sondheim, for instance, who's in the past month. People get really nervous and like, what are we going to do? Well, the thing you're going to do is what they did, right? Which was actually begin to take up space and begin to do the work that they felt like they were called to do. No one asked the Bell Hooks to write Ain't I a Feminist, which I think was her first book. And she actually wrote that She wrote that in college. I think that was like her first book in college, right? Like I don't think anyone was like, Bell. Well, she wasn't. Her name is Dr. Watkins, Dr. Gloria, but no one was like, oh, write this book, Gloria. She did it because she felt compelled, she felt called to do that, and that's something. Oh, ain't I a woman? That's right. Ain't I a woman? Which she wrote in college. She wrote and she was at Stanford. I think she didn't start out at Stanford. She ended up at Stanford as an undergrad. But anyhow, at what point do we say, okay, now it's my turn to step up? I have a good friend here in Atlanta that I've been friends with for over 20 years. We met as student organizers, and now he's just a very, I say a very iconoclastic leader within the Black and queer male community here in this area. And one of the things that we talk about, often is that, we as queer gay men lost a whole generation of elders, you know. And now that we're in our 40s, early 40s, like we feel as if we're like elders now, and I think this is so similarly related to the anxiety that we're experiencing right now, because I think at some point we have to understand that circumstances begin to shape the choices that we have to make, and if we actually care about ourselves and our communities, then we have to start thinking really seriously about what it is that I am supposed to do right now. How am I supposed to take leadership? What am I supposed to be saying now that our elders are leaving, which is what they're supposed to do? Everyone's like, oh my God, why is everyone dying? Well, because because we die. That's what we do, right? And when I look at that and feel into it, it's not that they're like running away. They're not escaping. They're just actually evolving into another state to continue the work, and so for us, that means that we have to start stepping up and taking their places. And quite honestly, there are so many brilliant people who have put in the work and the labor, and they've made their rounds, and they're stepping up, and then these people who are being called, right, to step in to do this labor on behalf of the collective, these aren't internet influencers. Like, they're not social media influencers. We're not talking about social media influencers, right? We're talking about people who have done hard, intricate, nuanced, emotional, intellectual labor for decades, right? And how that labor opened up a new way for many of us to think about ourselves, and that's the work that many of us are being called to do. That's the work that I am called to do. Like, that's what is driving, my present book that I'm working on, New Saints. That's where it came out of. Like, actually, this whole idea of talking about what sainthood looks like right now in this moment really came out of the ways in which I was being called to step into my own eldership as well, and what the responsibilities were and what the labor was to do that, So the book, New Saints, when you get it, you have another year before you get it. Actually a little over a year, maybe about 14, 15, or 16 months, sometime early into 2023. But the labor that I was called to do was to like actually show people what the labor was. So that's what you're going to get in this book. It's like you're just going to fall right into the labor that I do every day for myself and all the labor that I've been doing, really consciously for 20 years now, over 20 years, to show people what it means. Like, the people that we love who are passing, they did this. And they did it when they started young. This wasn't like a later in life thing, but this was something that, they were called to do, and they stuck with it through a lot of obstacles. So yeah, I think that for many of us, it's about asking ourselves, okay, what is it that I need to be doing now to support the collective? What is it that I need to be teaching or writing or studying maybe, or organizing. You know, because it's just like, you know, it's the age that we're in is on the upswing. You know, it is like we're not going deeper into something, but we're having to work out all the stuff that has kind of risen to the surface. Like there are difficult things that we have to work through individually and collectively, and that's what we're doing now. And it's not easy work, you know, and it's just really, it's just kind of like grueling, brutal work. And it's grueling because, I mean, in a real way, we don't know who we are anymore. Like, we've let systems of domination, violence begin to define who we are, you know? And what some of us are being called to do is to, like, actually disrupt the ways in which these systems are creating us, right? We're disrupting that creation and then turning that attention back to ourselves and asking ourselves, okay, who are we? What am I? You know, who am I outside of the system of racism, homophobia, and capitalism and patriarchy? You're like, well, who am I? You know, and what do I need to create? What do I need to bring into language to create a new reality that's actually about freedom, not just perpetuating systems of violence? You know, I think these are what these great people have done. You know, they've shown us, you know, what it means to redefine ourselves in systems that are trying to annihilate us, right? You know, and now we have to take that work further. And I think that I think this is also a theme of what we work through in these sessions with Medicine Buddha, but I think that it's easy to feel hopelessness when you don't see more, well, when you don't experience more than what your senses are allowing you to experience. So what does that mean? That means basically it's easy to feel like there's this intense struggle that like things are falling apart when we don't have the capacity to really understand and experience the bigger picture. You know, there's more than just like this world that's happening right now in our lives, and death and dying and COVID, and you know, it's more than that happening right now. And I think that practice is helping us to see the full picture, or the fuller picture. And within the fuller picture, there's much more hope in the fuller picture. There's much more hope. Because you begin to see that virtue and goodness always wins. Right? You know, because that is the nature of things, is virtue, goodness. It's easy to get consumed by the darkness. You know, the darkness loses power when you begin to understand the nature of the darkness. You know. Things also change when you begin to let go of this fixation on the physical body, right? When like you start to let go of this anxiety around the body being who you are, which is not. You know, this body isn't who I am. It's an expression of a deeper, essential expression of who I am, but it's not who I am, right? And because I'm so attached to the body, I'm afraid of death, right? You know, because I'm also attached to the body, I don't understand what death really is, you know. like I have to experience who and what I am that is not dependent on the body. Because the body will actually um, will fall away. Like, when our consciousness begins to separate from the physical body, there's a separation there. And for many people, that separation will be an experience of trauma because they haven't done the work to prepare to let go of the body when the time comes. And if you sometimes it feels like you're being ripped from the body, and that's just going to be a very painful experience that people take into the bardo of the spirit world that they have to work out. And it's possible to do so. Absolutely, it's possible to work through that trauma, but it's just still one more thing that we have to do. On top of being formless. Not for the first time. We've been formless countless and countless times. But we have to get reacclimated to that experience, right? Meditation on emptiness is really important. It's very important because it really takes us into the experience of the formless. And I've been, really, that's been a really important meditation practice for me, to learn how to navigate the formless. And not only to navigate the formless, but to also not get attached to the formless. You can't get attached to anything. You're not attached to the body. You're not attached to the formless, right? Again, it's the Heart Sutra practice. It's not this, it's not that, it's something in between. And that's where our practice has to be. It's somewhere in between the extremes. So again, if you have any questions, or if your question wasn't answered last week, please put that in the Ask a Question box below. If you're just coming into the space, I know it was kind of tricky getting into the space tonight. If you have a prayer, please go ahead and post that or say hello. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of transition. There's a lot of evolving. There's a lot of transition. There's so much going on. There's going to be a lot going on for the foreseeable future as well, right? And it's okay, because this is what this is. This is what samsara is, right? It's a struggle until you learn how to really do the struggle without being consumed by the struggle. To be in the world, to be in the body, to be in this realm, and not to be consumed by the realness of it all. That's what gets us. That's what consumes us, is the realness of the chaos. And for me, I manage the chaos, of course, by contemplating the emptiness, the nature of things. That's critical. But also for me, I just started understanding that I was creating a lot of chaos. I was creating a lot of struggle from my end because of the ways in which I was just attached to things. I was trying to control things. I didn't learn how to let things go. I had to learn how to let things go, rather. And as I've said over and over again, what many of us are missing is a deep contemplation on the characteristics of samsara, of delusion. You have to face this expression of delusion that we call samsara. Like, you have to face it. You have to stop running away from it. You have to stop avoiding it and saying, yeah, this is like, it's like you have to tell yourself the truth that this is what happens here. And until you do that, you'll never learn how to be free within the illusion. Of course, the freedom comes from wisdom. So wisdom, clarity, is what we're actually working to create, to give birth to, right? The more wisdom begins to build in our experience, the more clarity that we experience, the less power the chaos of, or the seemingly chaotic world has over us. You know, it doesn't mean the heartbreak disappears, because the heartbreak remains as long as we're practicing compassion. As long as we're invested in compassion, we will still remain sensitive to suffering. But that suffering doesn't consume us, it doesn't overwhelm us. You know, it's just an experience. You know, so there's this question, what does work mean? Everyone has different work. Describe what work feels like. To me, yeah, work is hard. So if it's easy, then it's probably not work. So that's for me. That's what I've understood about me. It's like, oh, this is really easy. Then that's a sign, you know, that maybe I've mastered something and I need to move on to it, to something else, right? But the work is ultimately to get free, is to transcend the binary, right? To transcend extremism, right? To transcend into the true nature of things. And what the work is learning how to develop wisdom, compassion, clarity and care, right? For ourselves and for everyone. But really it's for everything. Like, I have to learn to love everything in order to allow it to be free. You know, loving means accepting. Like, you won't be able to step through the illusion of this world until you let the world and all phenomena in the world be in its place. So letting something be in its place means that, like, I see it, I can feel it, I can recognize it, I'm not trying to change it. I say, okay, there it is. You know? And reactivity is disrupted. That's the work, disrupting reactivity. And when we're disrupting and letting go of reacting to everything, then the true nature of things begins to reveal itself to us, because we're not distracted reacting. You know? The work is the same for everyone. So, you know, we talk about the work, you know, we talk about racism, for instance, you know, different people have different work. No, actually, the real work is to understand who we are outside of systems that attempt to define us. You know, when we figure out who we are, that means we have to deal with the trauma of all the ways in which we bought into how systems have defined us. You know? So, sometimes it can sound like, oh, you know, people who hold a lot of privilege, you know, social privilege, you know, social capital, you know, things that we, you know, how we talk about power and privilege, like, you know, sometimes we talk about, okay, you have to figure out who and what you are. It doesn't mean that, like, that disappears. Like, it means that actually you're going to have to work through the heartache, the brokenheartedness, the trauma of what it has meant to live so far away from who and what you are. You know, who and what we are Buddhas. You know, we're awakened, right? But to get back to that awakening, we have to experience everything that has clouded that awakening. You know, so if you've invested in years, you know, unknowingly of white supremacy, you're going to have to go back and revisit what that has cost and learn how to see through that, to let go. When you start letting go, you begin to change, right? You begin to transform how you show up in the world, and that's when you really become anti-racist. You know, anti-racism is just an idea, you know, until we do the practice of experiencing everything that has been lost, or everything, all the pain that has come from investing, you know, knowingly or unknowingly, in systems that grant us privilege over other people. You know, there's a deep awakening that has to happen to free ourselves from participating in systems of privilege. You know, and you don't get there until you start getting glimpses of who you are. But those glimpses come with the experiences of the heartbreak, the trauma of what it has cost us. I'm not able to be here without having to do that work for myself. What is the pain? We go through this pain. Like, what is the pain? The pain is it's just the distance that we have to travel to get back to who we are. It's the miles that it's about turning around and saying, I've been walking away from who I am, because I've been told to do that, but now I have to turn around and walk back into the heart of who I am. And to do that, I have to go through all the things that I've done that has perpetuated this journey outward, if that makes sense for anyone. I would say a majority of the people in the world, at least the majority of people that I've come across, will not do that level of labor in their lives. I'm not saying they're not doing anything. I'm just saying that I think that the level of work that we can do, that we're able to do, is only impeded by our struggle. Well, the work will be disrupted because we won't be willing to really let go of the world and how we feel about the world and our fixation to comfort, right? And our belief, that there are things more important in this life than liberation. So I think that's the key thing here, like, you have to start believing that there's nothing more important than freedom, because if you work, ultimate freedom is actually going to get a whole bunch of people free, or it's going to inspire a whole bunch of people. Look, for instance, look at the Buddha. The Buddha obtained enlightenment, and look what happened. Look what he inspired. He and other, of course, many other teachers, right? Like, that's what happens when we commit to freedom. We begin to awaken other people around us and get them invested in the work of real freedom. Not just this whole social freedom, but ultimate freedom, bringing both social and ultimate freedom together. That's the kind of freedom I'm talking about. And that's an intricate, nuanced, confusing, frustrating project. But in my perspective, it's the only project that's worth it. Because basically, I'm just really tired of samsara. And you have to. This is as Fannie Lou Hamer said, you have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. You have to be sick and tired of this, right? And many of you aren't, because you're still being lulled, like you're being wined and dined by this reality. And some of us got a good deal. And this is not random. Like, this is merit and karma. Like, we were just kind of born in situations where we, quite frankly, haven't struggled enough. We haven't had to struggle. Some of us don't know what poverty feels like. Some of us don't know what surviving abuse and violence means. Like, some of us don't know what it means, to be perpetually devalued because of, whatever gender expression, or, your race, or, ethnicity, whatever, This is why I say the most oppressed will be those who will lead this liberation struggle ultimate liberation struggle, right? You know, and of course this is, I think, often lines up with liberation theology, right, which says that God is always on the side of the oppressed, you know, and that's important, you know. Privilege gets in the way of liberation struggle. It really does, because you're much more invested in the comfort of privilege than you are in like transcending the whole system of privilege and disprivilege, you know. And that's for those, and that's all of us. Like many of us experience some form of privilege. Like you have to. That's part of your work, is to actually disrupt the illusion of comfort and privilege, you know. And you may say, oh, I don't have anything to work for. That's actually part of how samsara is tricking us, right? It's, you know, it goes back to this Rumi poem, you know, this Rumi poem where this husband and wife are fighting, and the husband, they're poor, they're living in poverty, they have nothing, and the husband just loves it. You know, the husband is like, I love being, you know, like I love like all the stuff that we have, we can carry in our arms, like, you know, we don't have to worry about things. And the wife keeps coming back and was like, you know, you're not into this as much as you think. You know, I think part of what she's arguing is that like you're not actually facing the suffering of this, you know. And you think that like this is noble and virtuous, but like this is just nothing but struggle. Like we can't keep pushing everything away. Like there's at some point we have to like acknowledge that we need things, you know, to survive, instead of believing we can just survive off of nothing. I side with the wife. But anyway, later in the poem, she's, you know, she just goes, you know, listen, you think you're a snake charmer, you know, but actually the snake is charming you. And I think that's like the most intense read ever that anyone can offer anyone. You know, is that you think you're on top of this, but actually all the shit is on top of you. You know, and I think that's our relationship to samsara. In this case, is like we think that we have this under control, and actually we're actually being fooled by samsara. You know, whenever you think that you're in control, then you're actually absolutely not in control. You know, you're absolutely not in control. And this is why we do the labor of figuring out who we are, because our nature, our Buddha nature, our awakened self is beyond like the conditions of karma. You know, to realize our innate self is to actually transcend the boundaries of karma. You know, right now we're subjects of karma. You know, we're colonized by karma, until we understand that we don't actually have to be subjugated by karma. That karma is an illusion like everything else. You know? And so this doesn't mean that, you know, maybe you have this realization and just bad shit stops happening. No, bad shit continues to happen, but your relation to that stuff changes. It's not, okay, whatever, I'm sick. You know, that's what's supposed to happen. I have a human body. I'm supposed to get sick. You know, I lose things. Okay, that's what's supposed to happen. I lose things. You know, like this is, you begin to understand that this is what's supposed to happen. This natural process of the body isn't a punishment. It's just what happens. You know. This experience of snow, you know, it's supposed to help us navigate this. The snow is actually helping us to understand what reactivity is. You know, it's moving us from reactivity to experiencing back out to response. you know. And another thing that many of you struggle with is that you just don't practice enough. You know, you're not practicing enough. You're not, you know, you haven't really. As I think I said this last time, I think it's like you have to get to this point where you're like, the practice has to sink into your bones, into your flesh. You have to work a practice so much you're sick of it. And when you get sick of it, you just keep going. You know, that's the labor. You know, when I talk about the intensity of the work, you know, that's, you will experience everything. Boredom, doubt, lack of safety, insecurity, rage, everything comes up in practice because it's supposed to. That's the point. You know, it's supposed to dig the stuff out so we can actually figure out how to be in a liberatory relationship with it. A liberatory relationship means that we're in a responsive relationship. We don't get to a responsive relationship until we learn how to experience. We don't get to experiencing until we start disrupting reactivity. Reactivity is the level that we're working at. For many of us, this is where you're at. And you have to keep working it. You know, no matter how disappointing it seems, no matter how much we think we got it, and then we make a mistake and we slip back into reactivity, that's the practice. You just keep going. You begin again, over and over again. For the rest of your life, you begin again. That's what practice is. Beginning again, over and over and over and over and over again. Letting go of this idea that I'm supposed to get anywhere, because that's a trap. Right? Letting go of wanting to be anywhere and just be in the moment. Well, the thing about the body here, too, is that even if we're choosing disassociation, like we have to actually get to a point where we're choosing embodiment, right? You know, like you won't get free fragmented. Like the body just can't, the mind, the consciousness can't leave the body and just obtain enlightenment. The consciousness, in this life, in the body, the mind just can't take off and say, okay, we're enlightened. Because the mind is linked to the body. The body actually is an important part of the work of liberation. So if we keep leaving that, then we're missing a really important piece of the data. Now, in a formless experience, there's still a mental body. So that there's a physical body, there's also the mental body and the formless, and both of these bodies have to be allied with. We have to be embodied both physically and energetically in order to actually experience liberation altogether. You know? Now, how do we work through feelings of powerlessness when we do feel out of control from sorrow? It's a thought. Like this is all just a thought. It's a thought. It's a thought. That's how you begin to work with it. This is a thought. You know, I feel powerless. Well, it's a thought. So you go to the thoughts and you disrupt reactivity and you experience the thought itself. Being out of control is just very, you know, it's a thought. It's the mind. In this context, it's the thought. It's the mind. You know. And for me, like some of you, I think that we're gonna start practicing in a second. Um, but uh-oh. Sorry, my power. Oops. Now my power's out. But give me a second. I'm noticing that my computer is about to go dead because I don't have the right power. And just give me a second. Okay, there we go. Nope, that's not it. Huh, how weird. Sorry, one more second. Sorry, you all. I'm just having to reroute my power. Sorry. But talks amongst yourself. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Just one second. You ever have those moments where you're just like, I don't know what's happening with any of this technology, so this is where I'm at. Okay, everyone, just one more second here. This is the most bizarre thing ever. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're back. All right. So I have all these cords under me, and they weren't plugged in to the right sources. I had to like rewire everything. So anywho, so what was I saying? Okay, I'm gonna get to these questions in the question box. I know I broke the rules. I'm sorry, and started answering questions from the chat box. Okay, but I want to start practicing. But what was I saying before the power started going out? What was I going to say? Well, so this is what I want to say, and I'm committed to this work of doing this. But what I want to say is that, like, most of us don't get it because we're still in just this place of samsara, of delusion. Delusion, is lulling us. It's tricking us. Like, delusion is saying, it's like, just whatever delusion. For me, what would I say? I would say that, delusion charms us. Like, we get charmed by it, and we won't ever break free from delusion until we stop being charmed. And we stop being charmed by actually really dedicating ourselves to the development of wisdom and compassion together, really caring for ourselves and caring for others, by developing a deep clarity about what's happening. And that's going to bring us into some mighty discomfort. Compassion is not easy. Wisdom is not easy. But when you're doing it together, it's really, really intense. It's a really intense experience, you know? And I can only say that because that's what I do. You know, that's what I've been working on. It is a process of just letting go, moving through things, of saying, you know, I've been at points in my practice where, and I've told, you know, for those of you who've been in Medicine Buddha for a bit, I've talked about this, but I started taking the practice of Medicine Buddha seriously in retreat when I got really hurt and refused to leave retreats. And I said that, like, I will die before I leave this retreat. And Medicine Buddha became the practice that I relied on to heal, you know. I will die before I leave this experience that's helping me to get free. That's where you need to end up. You know, that's where you need to end up, maybe in your activism, you know, in your spiritual practice, you know, that you have to get to the point where it's like, I will die before choosing to stop this. You know, I will give up my life if I need to. That's how fucking serious you need to get. You know, until you hit that level of seriousness, you're just going to be wandering around. Not that great things won't be happening, not that you won't see great fruition in practice, but you're not going to break that. You're not going to break this ceiling out of this delusion. You know, because samsara charms us by manipulating our fear around death. You know, right? You know, this world manipulates everything around our physical sustainability in this body. Everything is wound into that. And then you have to get to this point where you're like, and fuck it. You know, you have to say fuck it. This is the ultimate charm of samsara. This is why in Buddhism we're so intense about death and dying and impermanence, because we know this is the key here. You have to understand that this is just an illusion, but samsara uses it. Delusion uses this to keep us in line. You know, it's a system. This is systems theory. You know, which I'm talking about in my next book. I'm talking about samsara as a system. This is a system that's been worked out. Well, I think it's just time for a Matrix reference. This is the Matrix. This is how the Matrix is set up. You know, so I haven't seen the new movie. I'm gonna see it soon. Don't worry. I don't care if you don't think it's good. I'm not interested in your opinion. Just want to say that. What are you willing to die for? You know, what are you willing to die for? And quite honestly, most of us, if we have kids, we'll say our kids, our grandkids. You know, I think that's a really common reference, right? You know, I'll die for my kids. I'll die for people that I love. You know. But here's the thing: will you die for yourself? You know, will you die for yourself? Will you offer your life to yourself? You know. You know, I think about the history of martyrs in the world. You know, just people who died because they refused to give up their convictions, their values, their belief, or their practice. And I'm, you know, good or bad, whatever, you know, but they refused, regardless, you know, to compromise what they believed in. And I think about that a lot, And like, this is a question that I'm often asking myself: what am I willing to die for? What's the line for me? Like, what's the line that I can't cross? So there's a um, an opera. There's an opera called The Dialogue of the Carmelites. And of course, one of our elders who passed, Jesse Norman, the great opera singer soprano from here in Georgia, passed away last year. That was one of her, one of the things, one of the operas that she did. And the Dialogue of the Carmelites is fictional, but it's this fictional portrayal of this convent of nuns who are executed. It was it's set in the French Revolution, where at the beginning of the French Revolution, religion was outlawed and people couldn't practice, Catholicism. And so they kept bending to the will of the people. So they had to take off their habits and live, and live in, street clothes, everyday clothes, and then they just got to a point where they're like, we can't do anymore. Like, we can't give up God, because you're pissed off, and because of that, they were all executed. And that's the last scene of the opera. And it's just, you can find this on YouTube. You can find these different stagings of this on YouTube. And it's just so chilling, because they're singing as they're going to the gallows, right? They're singing, Ave Maria, like the same lyrics but different, tune. And one by one they're singing until one person is left singing. And that one person sings until until their life ends, and I think about that all the time. Well, not all the time, right? But I think about it pretty often where I'm like, okay, what choices, like what would make me make that choice? To no longer be in this world if I had to give up something that was extremely meaningful for me. I'm talking about values, convictions, ideas, practice. And can we take that same energy to getting free? That I will die doing this if I need to. What are we willing to live for? And most of you, I'm very sure when I say this, you still have some work around this, you know. Will I die doing this? Because this is the situation. Here's the situation. Like, this isn't, liberation is not a cakewalk. It's not, yeah, great things happen as you get closer to enlightenment, absolutely. But, you're going through the darkness. You're going through, you're the antithesis to samsara. You become the antithesis. And when you become an antithesis to samsara, there are many ways samsara will retaliate against you, and your practice has to hold that retaliation. I'm not saying that you aren't brave and courageous. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that this is just something different. This is like beyond courage and bravery. This is about developing a vision and insight into what actually is. Because if you get an authentic vision, insight into what things actually are, then the intensity of the samsaric system will actually deteriorate for you. So I guess that's a really important piece of this. Like, what helps us to be willing to die is finally getting a glimpse of what things really are. And then you go, oh, this is what this is. Like, I'm actually not my body. Actually, death is just an illusion. Actually, everything is just an illusion. So what am I holding on to? What am I doing? Why is this so overwhelming? You know, and again, I want to reemphasize, this isn't a path of making things disappear, right? You know, we will still struggle. Like, even if you attain enlightenment in this body in this time, you'll still struggle, you know, because the body isn't where you belong, right? Like, you're a formless being. You're an expression, you know, of emptiness and clarity and energy. Like, you're not this. So there's always going to be tension, even if you're enlightened, but that your enlightenment holds that tension because you see what it is. You're like, okay, yeah, this sucks, but like, if I get what this is, and it's not so overwhelming anymore. It's intense, but not overwhelming. You know, I think that, you know, I'm going to come back to some of these questions too, don't worry. I think getting the glimpse into the nature of things is what's going to actually be helpful. Because that's going to actually be the foundation from which you make decisions about your life and about what you're going to do and struggle in the practice. What are you going to give up? You know? And this is a multi-lifetime process as well. So, you know, I don't want to seem so heavy about this because this is like, you're already doing good work. You know, you're doing great work. Like, you're here, you're practicing. There's so many signs that you're on your way. You know, but you'll get, as everyone does, when they get closer to enlightenment, you'll hit a threshold. You'll hit several. You'll get to a threshold where you're going to have to up it quite a bit, you know, because you can just coast on really great merit and virtue. That's, you know, you can get into that. That's a whole other cycle, right? But you have to transcend merit and virtue as well. Like, you have to break through that, because that's another thing, you know, that's you know, singing sweet nothings. You know, you get attached to that, but you have to go beyond. You have to go beyond comfort and discomfort into what's next. And then you get choices. You'll have to make choices to do that. You know, you'll get hard choices. So none of these choices are going to be easy. You know, I went into a 3-year retreat. That wasn't the easiest choice. It was a joyful choice. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the easiest. It wasn't the easiest thing, having to give up everything and just let people assume that you were joining a cult for years, and just have to contemplate not being in a relationship with people that you love for 3 years, and not being sure if you can pick up those relationships again after you finish it. But that was an easy choice. Like, it was hard, but it was also really easy. Of course I was going to do that, right? You know, but there are even more choices that you're faced with, you know, that I'm faced with. But, you know, I'll just tell you that, like, I'm very far along in this game, you know, and this is the only way I'm able to talk about this, because, like, I've had to do all of this in multiple lifetimes, you know, a lot in this lifetime, but, you know, but these thresholds that you get to, and you're just like, you know, it's devastating. Like, these thresholds, these choices you make, it's just like so devastating. It's like, I have to give up this, right? I have to give up even this. I have to risk even that. Like, everything has to be offered over and over and over again. You know, it's being ready for everything at any time, right? It's being in the world but no longer being fooled by the world, right? And the way that sometimes that's really hard to hold, right? Because that realization of the nature of things is actually a burden that we carry because we're in a relationship with other people who don't get that. So that burden is actually the brokenheartedness that you experience watching other people cycle through violences. And some of this violence is just it's karmic ripening that like you can't even disrupt. You know, systematic collective experiences of suffering and you're just like, whoa, I can't do anything about that, but I can pray, I can practice, I can do whatever work I can for people. But ultimately, we have to individually figure out how to free ourselves through the inspiration of others. But like I can't, the hardest thing to understand, the hardest thing to hold is that you just can't pull people out of suffering and just propel them into enlightenment. Like you just don't, no being has that ability. Because samsara is an individual project that we have to individually work out. Like we have to do our individual labor with the help of collective and communities, right? But it's us. We have to sit through the broken. We have to sit through the pain. We have to sit through all the trauma. Like we have to figure out the solutions, right? But all the resources are there, but we just have to do it. And it may not be work that we get far along in this life, right? But it's that labor sets up the causes and conditions for us to be able to continue doing this path in the next form. Be it, whatever form you take in the next life. Because there are multiple forms that we can take, But just doing what you can helps to create the causes and conditions for you to move further in the next life. You may not get free in this life. That's fine. But we have to develop the aspiration, right, and the conviction to get free. And you have to understand, these are why I make the choices that I do. This is why I disappear and go to Peru. Like this is why I'm involved in the lineages and the traditions that I'm involved in, because I'm very sure that actually that's not even the right word. There's nothing more important than getting free, because I now understand that that's the most important contribution that I can offer to help others to get free, is to show them how to get free. You have to show people, So going back to our earlier conversation about the influencers, well, not influencers, but like folks in the Desmond Tutu and so forth and bell hooks that we're losing right now, like they've shown us how to do something, and now we actually have to do it. Like the Buddha showed you how to get free, you have to do it now. It's like it's nice to be entertained. I love reading bell hooks. I've been reading bell hooks for over 20 years. Ever since I found bell hooks in my early 20s, I was like, yes, everything. Give me everything, right? And then as I was studying bell hooks, I was like, oh, like she's actually telling me to do this. Like she's like, yeah, this may be really nice and entertaining, but you actually have to put this into practice now, in the same way that I did. Right, and that's where the shit really began for me. It's like, oh, I have to live this, and putting all the practices together to start living this. This is where we're at, But we have these incredible systems of practice like Tantra, Vajrayana Buddhism, or Tibetan Buddhism, like these incredible systems of practice that are just always taking us there over and over and over again. Right? When we practice Medicine Buddha, we're moving things out the way so we start developing clarity and insights. Right? And that's going to actually start pointing us in the direction that we're going. So let's answer this one question. Say a little more about inviting formless into our practice. Techniques are just openness. I saw an entire spiritual city of beings at one point in Thailand doing much intensive practice. Now I have a struggle to be in other realms. Well, first of all, you have to let go of thinking that's special to begin with. You have to, as some of you begin to awaken to abilities to whatever those healing, visions, dreaming, clairvoyant, psychic, whatever these abilities are, you have to stop thinking that this is interesting. It's only interesting as far as it can help people, and that's it. This is the doctrine of Tantra, actually. Not just Buddhist Tantra, but the whole Tantric system. Well, there's actually the compassion-based Tantric traditions. I was to say that. Within compassion-based Tantric systems, cities or abilities have to be considered ordinary, because they will become a distraction that gets in the way of actually moving into the nature of who we are, into the nature of reality itself. And this kind of bringing together visions of multiple worlds, you have to ground yourself in this world. This is why we do earth practice. Earth is an element that transcends the physical world. Earth element is present, like all elements, energetically in all the realms. There's energy of foundation, stability, stillness. That is an expression of earth that's found in both the form and the formless. Developing a relationship with that elemental energy, particularly in this body, in this particular realm, is actually really helpful in helping us to stabilize here. It's being able to stabilize in the body and developing the agency to journey and to see things without us getting lost in that seeing and that journeying. And the earth is able to pull us back, to ground us back in this body, in this world. And this is going to just take time. This is just time. You just get to this point where it's okay. I write about all this in my book, but one thing that I've written about already in the draft, is that also I live in my neighborhood here in Atlanta. So for those of you who are, Atlanteans, so I live in 5 Points, Candler Park, and all this area was all Civil War. These were Civil War trails, like Confederate, Union armies marched through this area. There were small skirmishes. Not huge battles in this area, but there was a lot of military presence, in the 1860s here. And therefore there are graves and bodies that have been buried around here. So I say all this to say there are a lot of soldiers roaming the street all the time, but particularly at night. And they come up on my porch as well as night, because I hear the boots and everything. And sometimes I go out. I do ceremony with them. I do smoke ceremony, which is why I grow tobacco, because I need that for ceremony to offer them. It's something that's just it's calming for them to get that blessing. But it's really not that interesting at the same time. It's there are these soldiers, they're kind of roaming. Sometimes I'm a little petty and just remind some of them that they ended up on the wrong side of history. They were fighting for the Confederacy, so it's part of my duty as a descendant of, indigenous and enslaved people to let them know that they made a really fucked up decision. But beyond that, what comes in is the compassion, right? It's okay, I'm going to do what I can to help you. So I'm always doing ceremony to invite them to leave the earthbound plane, go into the formless, and offering smoke and all kinds of stuff outside, and it's not so interesting anymore. I mean, it's I do it because it's important. It's part of my activity, but it's like not something that like I lose sleep over. It's not something that like that's like I'm always talking about. It's just one of these things, and that's what you have to get to when you're having these experiences. Like, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, I'm journeying here. Okay, and for me, plant medicine just helped me to just bust through all of that because for me, my experience with plant medicine is just like everything at once. Like everything's going to happen at once in this 1 second, and it's just you get so overwhelmed that you just give up. You're like, oh, okay. Whatever. This is just part of reality, and this is what you'll grow into. You begin to understand that this is just simply an expression of a reality that I'm finally becoming acquainted with. So the earth, like again, this is for all of us. This is why we do so much earth-based practice. Asking the earth, we're not allying with the earth enough. I'm not saying that the earth is the most important element. But like it's important. The earth, right, is important now as an expression of grounding and stability and nurturing and sustainability. And we have to enter into a deeper relationship with the physical land and the energetic expression of the land, and that the earth follows us into the unseen world as well, and it's also grounding us there. Plant medicines are an expression of the earth. It's an expression of earth energy, because it's grown from the earth. I'm talking about real plant medicines, right? Not synthetic medicines. That I call those psychedelics, like synthetic stuff like that. I'm talking about plant medicines, ayahuasca and pachuma and psilocybin and so forth, right? And this is what we're doing. Like, you have to understand, I'm bringing all this together in practice for you. Like, because this is something that I have really worked hard to understand and to bring into my practice. And this is something I just naturally do now. I'm just really with the earth. I'm really with the unseen world. And it's not overwhelming, it's not scary, it's not intimidating, because I get the nature of this. I also have I've done a lot of work in being in relationship with my guides, and guardians. Yeah. It's funny when you start talking about this stuff just starts emerging around you. Yeah, and I'm beginning to see like little expressions of energy around, but and again, it's just really not. I like pay attention, right, just to see what it is. But afterwards, I'm like, oh, whatever. I don't know what that was, But it was not me doing that. This is all like very important. Like this is all like extremely important for us to bring into our practice, and it's like it can be mind blowing, But it's we don't get a choice anymore. Like this is we are dancing on an edge right now. We're on the edge of something. However, I can figure out how to like do a mudra of the edge. We're on the edge. Like we're dancing on the edge of something. And there's a lot of spiritual warfare happening. There are too many people on the wrong side of this as well. This is what it is. But and the way for us to push the balance back into something that's better. And this, is to start awakening and evolving. you know, is to start taking practices like Medicine Buddha and the practice of the mother seriously, and just allowing our, like, sitting over and over and over again, allowing ourselves to dissolve in the essence of the deity, which is our essence. Like a wisdom deity, like Medicine Buddha, wisdom deity arises out of the nature of reality, right? And wisdom deity is an expression of our own minds and our own awakened self. So when we're practicing with Medicine Buddha, we're actually awakening our own innate capacity for healing and transcendence. That is the most brilliant thing about Buddha Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, the Buddhist Tantra side of Tantra. Because I'm on both ends. I'm on like the Vedic Hindu side. I'm also on the Buddhist side, which is all wonderful. But I'm deeply informed by the Buddhist side of this, which says that like a deity is an expression of who I am. And of course we focus on the consciousness over the soul, but it's really all kind of mixing together for me at this point. So let's, once again, because of your insistent questions, I have talked almost an hour and a half. We haven't done any practice. That's gonna change next week. So I'm going back to practice. But in the next few moments, let's just move into a very basic practice. And again, this is a practice that I do. So when I talk about my own personal practice, it's not that like I do the same thing every day all the time. I did, when I was training and coming up. When you're training in a lineage, like it's important to do what the lineage instructs because you're building a foundation, right? And so therefore, but over time for me, it's evolving to a place where I'm able just to, I ask myself in the moment, what do I need to do? And the practice emerges. From sitting, doing, like whatever meditation practice or system of meditation to like ritual, chanting, visualization. It's like, what do I need right now? And you let your compassion inform you. When I'm working with the unseen world, which I'll probably do tonight, it's just like I just sit and say, okay, what do beings need right now? What can I offer? And I just try to do that. I try to offer this intuition, So beginning, this is going to take us into a little bit of practice, and I apologize again. We're going to go probably to 9, but we're not going to try to make this a habit. So we're going to go another 30 minutes. And so right now, what I'm doing is I'm coming into a kind of openness. And so I'm going basically into snow, right? So first of all, I'm just seeing what's arising for me in my body and my mind. I'm looking at sensations. I'm looking at what's happening in my mind. I'm beginning to name certain things. And so in the naming, what I'm actually able to name is like what's happening for me. And at this point in my practice, I'm able to name what's happening for many of you, because I can actually intuit a collective emotional experience. Even though we're behind screens all over the world and I can't see any faces, I can still feel. And I've gotten to a point in my practice where I know what's mine and I know what's other people's. Right? So feeling that. And for a lot of you, a lot of your energy is like right here. like here, maybe third eye down, just below the heart center, right? There's a lot of energy showing up right there, and that energy can come off as sensations like heightened heart, tightness, heart heightened, a faster heartbeat, tightness, fatigue, tightness here, forehead tightness, eyes, cheeks. We're going to do something to kind of relax that. Maybe a quicker breath. A lot of you are taking very short breaths. So if you're able to work with the breath tonight, I invite you just to start slowing that breath down, really taking your time to slowly inhale, exhaling, expanding it, right? If you're working with the breath and taking deep breaths in, just really inhaling and imagining that you're filling up your core from the bottom up, like you're filling up a jug of water, right? So that water is going down to the bottom and filling up from the bottom to the top. And that's the same thing with the breath. We're just filling up from the bottom to the top and slowly releasing. Maybe inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. And if you're not working with the breath, and if you are working with the breath too, either or, I encourage you to also just shift part of your attention to the weight of your body on the seats. Noticing the sensations of the body making contact with the seat. So you can split your awareness here. If you're working with both, if you're working with the breath, partially on the breath, partially on the weight of your body. Bringing those two experiences together, you begin to get some of this energy fluid. And again, when you're exhaling, imagine that you're releasing this energy, this tightness, even some thoughts, emotions, and you're releasing, you're giving permission for this material to be released in the stream, the flow of the out-breath. So at this point, if I'm using my snow practice, I'm moving into experiencing. I'm experiencing, getting curious about the feeling of what's happening. And the feeling is about sensation. It's letting the sensation of what's happening in the moment speak to you. Instead of you talking to it, it's speaking to you, it's talking to you. And you're just listening, you're paying attention. But that paying attention and listening is the experiencing. When you're ready, if you're still working with the breath, I invite you to imagine that you're actually exhaling down through the body, out of the body into the earth. So we're inhaling, releasing the exhale down through the body into the earth. Again, allowing whatever tense energy, tightness to travel with our breath down into the earth, for the earth to hold and neutralize. So again, when we're working with the earth like this, we're not hurting the earth. We're allying with the earth. We're aligning ourselves with a natural function of the earth, which is grounding, stabilizing, neutralizing. So a couple more breaths here. And so there's a next stage or step to Snow that I'm introducing in the next book, which is more about empathy, which I've already done that. But as we're experiencing and moving this energy around, we can also begin to reflect on how we're not the only ones experiencing what we're experiencing now or trying to do the work we're trying to do in this moment, that I belong to a community of people who are trying to get free, trying to understand what freedom means and developing these aspirations. So I'm not alone, even though I feel confused and overwhelmed or turned off or numb or whatever it may be. I'm not the only one experiencing this. And that begins to really cut through the sense of isolation and connect me to so many beings around me. So I want to go into just a short session of mantra. Te ta bekinze, maha bekinze, rasa sulung gate soha, which is simply a prayer. It's a medicine Buddha for healing. As we begin to chant this, as we're moving through, this work, and if you're not working with the breath, by the way, just imagining that this energy, the tightness, just naturally expelling from the body or actually trickling down out of the body into the earth is enough. But as we begin our mantra, imagining that this expression of medicine Buddha begins to awaken within the heart center. Now, if you're just joining us, this may be a little harder because we've been working on practices to do this. But a shortcut to get into this is to imagine that I would say to imagine, in my language, your beloved begins to emerge in your heart center. And what I mean by the beloved is the person or the being, right, who you experience love, compassion, kindness from. That being, be it formless, be it a spirit or deity, or be it an actual person that you're in a relationship with, that the essence of that being begins to awaken within the heart center. So that feeling of being loved and cared for begins to awaken. And just spending just a moment, just like working with that. What does it feel like for your most beloved, the being who cares for you the most, begins to awaken right in your heart center? To feel them right here as a part of you. And when you're ready, I encourage you to shift your attention back up to your heart center. You're beginning to imagine breathing into the heart center. And again, if you're not working with the breath, don't do this, but just continue focusing on awakening your beloved. But if you're working with the breath, beginning to inhale in and out of the heart center. And as your beloved awakens, you imagine that they begin to radiate this warm, white, healing energy from the heart center. So your heart center begins to glow, or you begin to feel the energy, whatever feels appropriate for you. If you can just feel the energy, it's fine. If you can imagine the energy being light, that's fine, or whatever else works for you. Let energy begin to awaken in the heart center, and as we breathe into the heart center, holding the breath for a couple of moments, and then as you exhale, imagine that we're exhaling internally. So when we exhale, it's like the exhale just shoots and spreads within the inside of the body, like dispersing that energy of healing and love from the heart center throughout the body, up into our heads, our ears, to our noses, to our fingertips, down to our toes. Just every exhale is just releasing this energy. It's like it's blossoming. And in my practice, it's this experience of, as I exhale, it's like my heart blossoms and it sends out and radiates this energy of healing throughout the body. And so it begins to slowly shift any negative energy out of my body. And so as we go into the mantra is going to support. this practice. Begin our mantra practice. Uteya Saung Begenze Begenze Ma Begenze Rasa Sumunga Tesuha Teya Saung Begenze Begenze Ma Begenze Rasa Sumunga Tesuha Teya 베겐제 마 베겐제 라스 수마가레 좋아 대하자 베겐제 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 베겐제 마 베겐제 라스 수마가레 Yanze, Raza Sumangare Soha, Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha, Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangare Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangate Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangate Soha. Teata Om Beganze, Beganze, Ma Beganze, Raza Sumangate Soha. Now returning our attention back to the heart center. Kind of letting go of the internal exhale. And imagining that as we exhale, we're beginning to exhale out the top of our heads, up into the space above us. So inhaling into the heart center, releasing that out the top of the head. And again, if you're not working with the breath, just releasing that out the top of the head. Just one more breath. Alright, coming back to a natural breath. Alright, just moving through the last stages of our snow practice, which is just letting everything go. So letting go of thinking about anything, visualizing anything, just let everything go. And of course the last stage is letting everything float. Letting everything float. And floating means that I'm not attaching, I'm not holding on, I'm just letting everything be. It's in this stage where we can develop an experience of letting samsara be. Not reacting to it, just letting it be. And then letting it be, we begin to see the depth of delusion. Because we're not reacting to the first thing that comes up. And then the heart opens. These are just experiences that we just let be there, let them flow through. And so when you're ready, coming back into the space, awakening the body through simple movement. Just stretching, just doing whatever feels appropriate for you. And let's just turn our attention now to our closing prayer, Shantideva's prayer. And we'll recite this 3 times. 3 times. Alright, so we'll begin together. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space, and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And lastly, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. Right. All right. All right, friends. I'm going to answer this one last question. This is the question I didn't get to. I find it scary when I become aware of those energies outside of myself. How do I find centeredness in that experience? But this is just the practice of developing trust and refuge. It's learning how to take refuge in practices, beings, experiences that are there to hold us, to protect us, to guide us. You know, this is the fear. Like the fear is like really at the center of a lot of our struggle here, right? It's just of course. Like so often, I think that I imagine or visualize the work of liberation is just like being told to jump off a building or jump off a ledge, and being told that like if you have faith, you're going to get caught. Just like Neo had to do in the first Matrix movie, right? But he didn't succeed. It's that level of faith that some of these energies are here to protect me, but because I'm so afraid of them, I actually sabotage the ways in which they're trying to take care of me. In the same way that I'm afraid of being loved, and the way that I sabotage other beings from loving me. Tantra is the path of fearlessness, and it's true. It's a lot of fearless. You become fearless when you begin to understand what's really happening. We're afraid of the assumptions that we're making about what we think is happening, but when we develop the wisdom, the clarity here, you begin to say, oh, like that's what that is, right? Even if you're working with dark forces, like, dark forces, evil forces, right? Even then, the deep embodiment of love is this armor, this weapon that cuts through darkness. It really does. But we have to believe that. We have to cut through all the cliches about love and really get into what love really is. And love is just this deep, profound acceptance, where you let everything be in its place. When you let everything be in its place, you begin to see everything finally for what it is. I know, for those of you who are new, I know this is a lot to take in, but just to let you know that at this point, I'm not going to be holding back a lot moving forward. It's not really a time of holding back. I'm just going to turn on the faucet and let it flow out. I do, at some point, this week, I'm figuring out some of the workshops I want to give beginning of the year. But I want to do some work around protector energy. I know we in Burmese Martial, we do have a working group or a practice group around protectors, but I'm going to offer protector practice really in this form. And just working with my protectors and offering those protectors to you. Six-arm Mahakala, Shudrupa, Kali. Tara is actually one of my protectors, but Kali, this is a rabbit hole, but Kali is Kali. Tara is Kali, so we'll get into that. Even Medicine Buddha is a protector. I mean, every deity, wisdom deity, is also a protector, I want to do more of that work with everyone, so I think that's where we need to go, is into really working with very strong energy forces around us and really learning how to ally with them. And that's going to really help you start moving through the world a lot less afraid of the world. Part of the reason I do what I do in the world, because I have learned to work with the energies that want to work with me instead of always fighting them. And there are some energies that show up. That really would scare the shit out of people, particularly in the form that they take, but they're beings of light, and this is the complexity of this. Now, I'm tired of talking now. It's past 9 o'clock. Okay. I'm setting a hard boundary and being quiet. So thank you, everyone, for being here, for showing up. We're going to do it. We're going to keep it under time next week, and which is probably, it's probably a sign that I need to do more teaching, So thank you, everyone, for hanging in there, for being a part of this, and I continue to pray that the energy that we've cultivated stays with you, that becomes a part of you as we continue to move on in our practice, and as we move on. So next Monday, we'll be in the new year. So we're just going to keep moving on and doing what we need to do to get ourselves free, to get our communities free, right? And just working through these hard questions. This is incredible. Did you? Huh. So no one saw a bulb of light go through the screen, did you? Did anyone see that? So I have stirred up some energy now. Okay. So yeah, so I don't know what I was saying. But yeah, next Monday, New Year, and let's break some new territory. Oh, this is what I was saying. This is brand new territory for many of us. Oh, did you see that? Did no one see that? The light that just went down right here. Huh. So interesting. They're little like spheres of light. They're moving in and around. Yeah. Anyway, be that as it may. Um, so thank you everyone, and I hope you get some rest and take care of yourself. And um, it looks like orbs passing through, which is not uncommon. When I dig a little deeper, I dug a little deeper tonight for people, for us, for our practice. So there always calls in a whole bunch of energy. But we can talk about this later because it's getting late. So I'll talk about this more next week. Okay, thank you everyone. I love you all. Please be well. And I'll see you soon in some online venue for another year. Okay, thank you.